Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teamwork, a Better Way podcast. I'm Christian Napier, your host, and I'm joined, as I am every week, by uh, a giant of a man, both literally and spiritually and
Oh,
symbolically. Spencer Horn. Spencer, how you doing?
I'm so good, Christian, and thank you so much. It's always so great to be with you, and it was great because I got to see you in person for quite a bit last week.
Yeah, I mean, the reason we didn't have a podcast last week was because we were in Nashville, Tennessee for the National Speakers Association conference convention called Influence. And that was fascinating for me. It was the first time I had been there. And it was great to meet you and so many other wonderful people, just surrounded by really, really smart people. And I learned a ton while I was at that conference. So it was great to see you there. What did you think?
Well, I love to go to Influence because it is just you get to meet so many influential people, and that's one of the reasons why they call that influence. And we are meeting people from all over the world, Christian, that are speakers and leaders of organizations and helping people to become more effective in their lives, influencing people to be more productive and effective. And so one of the reasons why I go to Influence every year for my business, which is influencing people, is to learn how other influencers are doing it and learn from them. And it's such a powerful time to be mentored and learn from the absolute best. And just meeting people and getting to know them and having them as resources to constantly challenge and help me improve. That's one of the reasons why I go every year. And I thought you would love it, and hopefully you did.
Yeah, it was a fantastic learning experience for us. Of course, our participation was a little bit different because we were actually a sponsor of the conference, and so we didn't get to go to all of the sessions and everything and learn as much as you did. But I did attend a few, and what I attended was amazing. And more importantly, it was really a fantastic experience for us to get to know speakers who could really, really benefit from using our product of the Raconto solution. Uh, I have to ask you about the name of the conference, Influence. It's an interesting name, and it's quite apropos for professional speakers because that's what you do is you influence people to help change lives, either individually or organizations. What kind of brings us to the topic of today, which is influence itself, right?
Yeah. Become
Following
a become a team influencer is what we talked about.
Yes, become a team influencer. So let's dive into this amazing topic following the lessons that we learned at the Influence conference. Tell us, you've got a great array of thoughts to go through today, Spencer. So why don't you walk us through what it means you're thinking about becoming a team influencer?
Well, I wish I had some more thoughts specifically from things that I learned that I wrote down, but just in the interaction applied to some things that I've already experienced. For example, there is something called a compliment bias, and one of the things that we can take advantage of as leaders is to look for the good in our team and our people, look for or actually catch them doing something good. So often I hear managers talking about, I wish my people were doing this, I wish they were doing that. When they do something that you want, actually catch them and compliment them. And some people listening may say, well, isn't that what I pay them for? I pay them to do the right things. Yes, you do. But there's something very, very powerful about giving a compliment. It lets people know that you are noticing. It lets people know that you care and what they have to do matters. And those are things, just those very simple things that can create a strong connection with members of your team to you as a team member, whether you're a peer or a team leader, to garner influence with them. So that was the first thing, and I noticed that, and I saw that happen live as people were, were connecting and giving people compliments and networking for future, just as to call on people when they needed help. If you know someone is trustworthy just because they pay attention to you and you've built a rapport and a relationship with them, it's easier to call that person when you have a need. And that's something that I saw very prominently at the Influence conference. What about you? What did you see?
Well, I saw a ton. What I saw were a group of people. I think there were like 900 or 1,000 attendees there,
Yeah,
right? And most of these people are either solopreneurs or they lead small organizations, right? So in most cases, they're not leading an organization of 20,000 people. They're people who are, for the most part, small business people, and they are working on developing or refining or promoting their brand, right? And before our call today, we were talking about brands and the importance of brand, uh, and how that, it's not just necessarily from a marketing standpoint to our clients, but also our own personal brand and how our brand influences our team and our team's performance. And what I gather from what you said, Spencer, is that we actually have a lot more influence on our team than we might think, and that uh, when we do things like you say, pay compliments to people, what we're doing is we are developing and leveraging that influence, not necessarily manipulative ways, but in ways that can really help strengthen our team. And so that was something that I learned, and something that you also shared with me before we started recording, was the importance of your own personal brand, and the brand of your team, and how people kind of see themselves. What's the brand of the team? What are we known by? And I'm just, I'm curious, to get your take, uh, you know, when it comes to brand. You asked some really good questions. What's your brand with the team, and why does this matter? So why don't you tell us a little bit about uh, our personal brands, the brands of our teams, and why those matter, and how we can build those brands, our
excuse me.
personal brands, with our teams.
Well, thank you, Christian. Everybody, every organization has a brand. Every team has a brand, and it's really, I guess, whether you want that to be an intentional brand or accidental. So think of some famous brands that you're aware of. I mean, just name some. What are brands that you interact with?
Well, it's funny you say that, and the first thing that comes to my mind was Olympic Games, because I work with the International Olympic Committee, and the rings.
Yeah,
The Olympic rings are a huge brand. Companies pay hundreds of millions of dollars to be associated with that brand,
yeah.
and so that was the kind of the first thing that came to my mind. But that's coming from my own kind of myopic sphere. But I was thinking of Olympic Games, and then the brands of all the sponsors that work, the top sponsors that work with those games. But that's the one that came to my mind. How about for you?
One of the most famous brands that I've actually had the opportunity to work very closely with was National Geographic. It's that yellow triangle, and it is an iconic brand. And I, from firsthand, know how carefully they protect that brand. And we were co-branding a theater in Victoria, British Columbia, with National Geographic. And so I got to work with National Geographic and see just the inside of the organization, all the way up to the CEO, Gil Grosvenor at the time, and the president of National Geographic Television. It was fascinating. And work with their brand managers. And it is a powerful brand. Think of a brand like Apple. Whether or not you're listening to this and you use Apple or not, what happens is, when you look at an Apple store now, so many other stores are actually copying how they do retail, because they've really changed the whole process. They wanted to create an experience. You go into an Apple store, and the Apple uh, 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 retail experts in there, they have been trained in customer service and in hospitality, and how they work with you, and literally for a month before they even allow you out on the floor. They don't just hire you and say, okay, we're going to do some training, and here are our core values, and go take care of our people. they put them through a rigorous training program. So much so that when an Apple store goes into a location, retail location, whatever it is, it will increase traffic by 20% to wherever they are. That is the power of a brand. And you and I, Christian, and anybody who's listening to this, whether you're a member of a team or a leader of a team, you too have a brand. A brand that can attract people to do the work, to stick with the team, just like that Apple brand brings people to a physical location. People join an organization because of culture, which all comes down to individuals on that team. It's developed by individuals. That brand comes from human beings. Yeah, we can say, here are our core values, but if it's not lived by you and I, then there's a dissonance, and people will end up leaving. And they don't leave a company. They don't leave our company. They leave me. They leave you. They leave people. And so therefore, our brand is something that we must curate. Every single time we have a conversation with a team member, we are adding to or taking away from our brand. Every time we make an assignment or fulfill an assignment or take on something and follow through or not follow through, we're adding to or taking away from our brand. So that's what comes to mind. Thoughts that this is bringing up for you?
Yeah. So what came to my mind as you were talking about, brands really come from people. Yes, consumer brands, it's a little bit different because, uh, you know, we may not know. I mean, Steve Jobs is the exception, right? We associate him with Apple, and he personifies Apple. He's a celebrity, but we may not know who the CEO of Procter and Gamble is, or
Right. No, that's
something.
true.
So from a consumer standpoint, that's true. But uh, it made me think of the University of Utah football team. You know, their brand, their culture is very much aligned and associated with and comes from their head coach.
Yeah.
The way he coaches, his style of play, the types of players that he recruits, his reputation for building talent that's can go on to the National Football League. Uh, the brand's reputation as being really player led. When they have student leaders in the locker room that really take that. But that all you're absolutely 100% on point. It's all down to the people, uh, and so I'm with you. I'm with you all the way on that. That really comes down to the individuals, and it's a reflection of us. And
Every team, Christian, every single team, whether it's at Procter and Gamble, if you're working for Procter and Gamble, you're on a team, and I guarantee you that team's personality is a reflection of that team leader, whether that's intentional or not. And so hopefully part of what hopefully you're getting the message that we're sending here is you can be intentional about that. Kyle Whittingham, the head coach of Utah football, is very intentional. He knows what his brand is, and he attracts a certain type of player that fits with that, and they are drawn to him because of that culture there. And there's an expectation of performance when you get there by the rest of the team. That personality pervades, it just permeates the entire team. So part of being a team influencer is understanding what is your brand? What do you want to be known for? And some people, will just, I just want to be this, hardcore, hard nosed, you get the work done. It's all about, productivity here. Well, let me tell you something. That's a brand that is not sustainable. Kyle Whittingham has a tough brand. I mean, he's known as creating this tough culture, but he cares. He's created that family environment. When there's a problem with a player, he is there. He has given players that have had challenges in other programs a second chance because he believes in people. He gives faith. He trusts them. He allows them to, hey, here's what we're building now. Now be a leader within our organization, so he doesn't control everybody. So there's kindness, there's care, there's compassion, and there is, you give it all you got. And that will lead to I think some more benefits of what happens on a team lead, which I want to talk about here on the other side of our bumper. Let me come back to this idea of biases that you can use to influence. One of the most powerful biases that we have as humans is something called reciprocity bias. I'm sure you've heard of that before. And it is something that research and science has proven that is just so strong within us. And it's, it goes back to our need to survive in earlier cultures. If, we needed food, someone gave us something, we had this desire to repay that just for the survival of the species. But it's something in our culture today that is just absolutely expected. I don't know if what happens when people send you Christmas cards. Do you return and send them back Christmas cards?
I will say, truthfully speaking, we used to do a lot of Christmas cards, but it became a big work for my wife, and it got overwhelming to the point where we stopped sending Christmas cards to people. And so we get very few cards now because of the
There
reciprocity
you
thing,
go.
right?
That's right.
And it's because if you send one and you don't get one back, then you just aren't going to send a card to that person the next year, right?
That's right.
And so
So
it's a
that's an
perfect
example
illustration.
of the reciprocity working or not working. And there's an individual that actually tested this theory and sent cards to complete strangers and was surprised that he would get them back. I remember in high school, I don't know if this happened to you in high school. I would ask out a girl, but my first date was a girl's choice. I was shy. I was 16 years old, and a girl asked me out. And then I returned the favor and asked her out. And I remember, thinking that there was this unwritten policy: if somebody asked you out, you would at least take them out once. And when I met my now wife in high school, we had met on a blind date. I didn't go out with her. My best friend did. So we doubled, and I was going out with my now wife's best friend, and my best friend was going out with my now wife, Jana. And after that, we both admired her, my date was great too, and we had a great time. But I just liked and coveted my friend's date. And so we were both involved in similar activities. So there's a similarity bias. And I remember going to a church activity to see this girl that I had doubled with, but it wasn't my date, and perform at church. She was playing the flute or something. And afterwards, she came up and introduced one of her good friends by the name of Sid to me. And Sid, right then and there, asked me on a date. I had to then return the favor and ask her out, which I really wanted to ask Jana out, which is my wife. But this reciprocity bias caused me to date like 3 or 4 times this other gal, and she was great. We had so much fun, and we doubled with my date, and it actually was helpful in the future relationship because she saw how I treated her friend, who had some cognitive challenges, which is a long story due to an accident. But just how I treated her, I guess, was something that reciprocity bias made her more inclined to like me. So even though I wanted to go out with Jana, who's now my wife, I was, because of this social norms, I mean, it just was the right thing to do, right? Well,
Absolutely.
did you ever experience that?
Well, I I probably didn't have as active a dating life as you did when I was in high school,
Pretty
but Either that or I've just suppressed the memories of it because I don't remember too much. That being said, I totally agree with the reciprocity bias. If you do things for people, they will be inclined to do things for you. It, but it, I think it works best if it comes from a real genuine place. Again, that it's not a manipulative thing, but it's coming from a genuine place. You're showing people by doing things for them that you care about them, and they naturally, as you say, they naturally want to return the favor.
You know, Christian, you bring up a good thing, a very important point. And there's an entire book. It's called Influence, believe it or not. Here we are talking about influence by Robert Cialdini. And the whole purpose of this book is to show how these biases and how these different social constructs that we have are used to manipulate us every single day. The idea of reciprocity, the idea of scarcity, the idea of authority, all these things. And so it's a kind of a cynical book, but if you can look past the cynicism, it's very powerful. And you know, we have to, as you pointed out, rightly so, use these powers for good, because anytime you have the ability to influence, you can either do that for good or bad. That's just a fact. And so I'm assuming that everybody listening to us wants to do good out there, and you can take these principles and apply them for evil, just like anything. There's an interesting history of organizations using this idea of reciprocity. I don't know if you're familiar with the religious group, the Krishnas, and you know they in the 70s they would get a lot of attention for their dress, and they'd play their symbols, and but they weren't getting any donations, and so the church was financially starving. Well, they learned about this idea of reciprocity, and they started to begin giving. They'd come up to potential donors, and they would give them a book like the Bhagavad, what is it called? Gita Bhagavad. I don't know, but it's their book on. I'm sorry if you're a Christian listening. I apologize. Or they would give their magazine or a flower. And even if you didn't like that person, there was just this feeling that you had to give them something back. And so saying no to that is super hard. And it was so successful. They were so financially successful that it enabled them to finance many of their temples. Even here in Utah, we have a Krishna temple to grow their followers and just fund their operations just by using this reciprocity. I actually have a picture for those of you who may be watching. In 2017, I took my son Josh. I take all my kids on a senior trip for graduation. We went to New York, and here we are in Central Park, and one of the Krishna people there in the park came up, and I didn't put the video on. I wish I would have put that on. But he approached my son and went to hand him a bracelet, and my son just gave him the thank you symbol, thank you so much, but no, and then grabbed him and said, "But I want to take a picture with you." And he was all disappointed, but then he smiled for the camera, thinking, "Hey, maybe I'll give him a picture and they'll donate." He was disappointed, but so we broke the reciprocity rule on that one, Christian.
Well, it's interesting. So you, thanks for sharing the picture. So what you've basically done is given us some tools. If there is some disconnect between our actual brand, what we have now, and what we want our brand to be, now these are some simple ways through compliment by reciprocity, complimenting others. Uh, how have you seen this work in your profession? I know you go back a lot. You had a great mentor. I got the chance to meet him at your son's wedding. Um, but tell us about your own experience uh, as an influencer, or at the, I don't want to say at the mercy, but working for an influencer, and how that benefited you and your team in a positive way.
So, you met Kelvin, and he's somebody that has had an enormous quote unquote influence in my life. he has taught me so much. And when I worked for him, I was out of college. I mean, I was 27 years old. I had so much to learn, and he taught me. He spent time with me. He encouraged me. He challenged me. I mean, I've told the story of when he said, you know, you've got to turn things around, or I'm going to have to make a change. So he was able to give me feedback, and he was, you know, he. So often, I think managers feel like, you know, what some of the things that we talk about are causing our society to be, you know, soft, or our business to, you know, not be challenging and just getting work done. The contrary is true. Because of my relationship with Kelvin, I was more committed. I was dedicated. I worked 80 hours a week, and that's not a small number. You know, he was somebody that said, I don't care how long you work. I don't care if you work 20 hours a week, Spencer, if you just get your work done. My work never seemed to end. But because of my desire to be in that culture, I mean, I loved what I did. I loved who I worked with. I appreciated Kelvin. I was committed. That's an example of a team influencer. And I've had experiences in my own life where I did a poor job of influencing and saw the impact negatively on the team, where people weren't bought into you know, my vision or direction, because I attempted to force that in a way without using the proper tools of influence or the patience and helping persuade people. And some of you are saying, well, you know, if you're the boss, you should just get people to do what you want. Well, sometimes it takes time to build that authority and that influence. And you know, there's how do you get there? Well, we all have, you know, there's different levels of credibility. You know, organizations right now are looking for skills. I mean, so now we used to look at resumes. Now we're actually looking at skill sets, and we're measuring those to make sure that you can do the job. Some of the things that we don't measure that are enormously valuable tools or skills are just the ability that we have to move people. Now, I have on the positive side seen what happens when I get it right, when I do what Kelvin did with me, when I take the time to instead of just springing, you know, an idea and saying, all right, everybody's going to get behind this, is to spend that one-on-one time with my direct reports, building that relationship, having their support and their buy-in. So when I need help influencing others, I now have a group of people that have bought in, and so think about the idea. If you've got this, think about how marketing works. I mean, I've heard it told about the microwave oven. I mean, when the microwaves came out, I mean, did your family immediately get one? We didn't.
No, in fact, they were against it. Like, why would I want one of those things,
Right. I
right?
mean, you're going to radiate your food, and so there was a lot of resistance, but there were some early adopters, right? And so what happens in this process of influence is the marketers of these microwaves, they found the earlier adopters, and they were expensive machines. I remember, you know, Mana and all these different ones. They were just these huge things. But over time, then we had this next phase of people, because the friends of these early adopters was, wow, that's really cool. And you know, then we have movies like Twins, where Arnold Schwarzenegger says, I like nuked food, right? Um, and so we started having more and more people get them. And today, every house has one, but it didn't happen all at once. There's a process of getting people to adopt, and that's all about influence. And so finding people initially that you can connect with and have take advantage of some of that similarity bias, maybe people that think the same as you, and then slowly influence the team to get to the direction of effort or change that you want to make as a team leader.
It's interesting you mentioned that it takes time. So I've got a colleague, a good friend, who runs a software company up in Park City called Atlas RTX. He's been at it for, I think, 6 or 7 years. In the last year or so, I've been noticing posts on LinkedIn from employees talking about the culture. They do a lot of fun things together. They have a lot of parties. They do outdoor activities and fun run things, and they do a lot of this kind of stuff to bond. Uh, I bring it up because it does take time. It does take time to build that culture, and so
Right, right.
uh, you know nobody listening is going to be able to wave the magic wand and then all of a sudden have the brand, of their team be reformulated. It takes time. Just as you said, it took time for the market to adjust to using microwave ovens. It takes time for companies or for teams to establish the brand that they really want. One thing that I will say is once that's established, if you look at companies, they spend a lot of time and money to protect the brands they created, right? So if you look at the International Olympic Committee and you look at local organizers, they have a department or a unit that's called brand protection, right? That's now they call it rights protection, but it's all about protecting the Olympic brand or the brand of the city, and so a lot of time and effort is going into making sure that the brands that people have built trust and faith in are protected. And I think that's something that we should all be cognizant of as leaders as well. We can't just coast on our brand, but the brand deserves protection, and that's done by people within the team, right?
Christian, I have a
That we work
question.
together to protect the brand.
How did they do that with respect to volunteers? I mean, how did they take that brand idea and permeate that through the managing all of the volunteers?
So every volunteer goes through some training, right? Uh, because they want the volunteers are the face of the games, and so volunteers need to have the skills needed to be the face of the games. And so that usually encompasses three different rounds of training. One is kind of a general training that all of the volunteers go through, where they learn things about customer service, they learn things about conflict resolution. Uh, they even just simple things like when you're gesturing, use an open hand, don't point. Things like this that the volunteers learn. Uh, to give them the skills to really represent their city and their brand. And then they learn some more specific things related to their role, and then they learn some more specific things about the venue and the location that they're working in. So they kind of have this three-pronged approach to volunteer training, but all of it is to make sure that they're delivering good service to people, because A, people deserve it, and B, it reflects positively on the brand. And so and usually that's a program that goes on. It starts anywhere between 6 to 12 months or more before the games happen. They start the training of the volunteers. So
So
that's a great.
you said something that I think is so important that I think we don't always think of, and that is body language. Just something as simple as holding an open palm instead of pointing sends all kinds of signals. And whether you are aware of it or not, every interaction, again, I said every interaction adds to or takes away from your brand. Think about what your body is doing in certain circumstances. When someone is coming into your office, are you frowning? I mean, I have a very severe look. And I had to be aware, Christian, of how my eyebrows and how my face were showing up. And, because I can concentrate, and when I concentrate, I look very stern and like I'm not agreeing, or I just very unapproachable. And plus, with my stature, I'm 6'7", I can be intimidating to a lot of people. As a matter of fact, I've had people in my career tell me that was something hard for them to get over until they got to know me. I would be sitting, in my church role. Sometimes I get to, I'm sitting on the stand, and I would be listening to the speaker from the back, and I would be concentrating and looking, and I'd look down at my wife in the audience, and she'd be like, and I'm like, and just something as simple as raising your eyebrows and smiling when someone comes in your office invites them Now, you may say, well, I don't want them to come to my office, so I'm going to scowl. Well, okay. Well, that's, again, part of your brand. But you can smile and say, hey, this is great. I'd love to talk to you, but now's not a great time. Um, and then set those parameters of when you want to do it. But how we just show up. If some Have you ever had this situation where you've asked someone how they're doing and they're like, I'm fine. And there's this dissonance because their body is not congruent with what they're saying. And so when somebody is talking, are you interested? Are you leaning in? Or are you thinking about what you're going to say? Is your body pointed away? Are your feet pointed away? Is your head turned away? Or are you focused on your team? So something as simple as pointing with your palms up versus your fingers can make people on your team feel very, very special. And we are so often, I think, unaware of how our body language impacts how we influence our teams.
It's a really great point, Spencer, because it will show your team members whether you are genuine with them. If you try to use the compliment bias, for example, as a technique to gain influence, your words are saying one thing, but your body is saying another. Like you say, I'm distracted and I'm thinking about what's going on over here, and I'm giving this compliment. People see right through that, right? They know what's going on inside your head because your body is telling them what's going on inside of your head. And some of this happens and it's not even conscious. We don't even think about it, like the pointing versus the open palm. Another thing that we learned in Salt Lake 2002, I remember this going through the training, is here locally, when people say thank you, we often respond with a mm-hmm, right? We do this mm-hmm. And in some cultures, that's seen as dismissive when you do a mm-hmm. So we had to train our volunteers. If a spectator or somebody came up there and said, thank you for helping me, don't just say, mm-hmm, you know, actually say, well, thank you so much. Thanks. So respond with words, not just a, mm-hmm. And so just very small things like that, that we may not even be aware of. And we may not be aware of that because of the culture that we come from, may be interpreted differently by other people. So it's a really important thing, I think, as you said, to go through some training to be made aware of these things so that you can correct them. And some of those things can be corrected very simply. It's not hard to change a habit from pointing to an open palm, right? It's like, oh, okay, I extend these fingers. That's I can learn how to do that, and you figure that out. So I really appreciate you bringing up the point of body language and just how critical it is to actually exerting influence or having influence over your team.
Well, I think that I know that's right, and I think one more area that we could talk about, Christian, is credibility. So great, you can do all of these techniques and work on your brand and be intentional about how you show up and how you interact with people and how you treat them and how you spend time with them, what you give to them, and in terms of your attention and time. But you also have to be able to do the work and have a set of skill sets that is uh, known for getting things done. And there's several types of credibility. So there's what's called initial credibility, and that is something that precedes us, right? It's our reputation. So if you're going to start working for an organization, we have recruiters out there saying, "Oh, you need to come work for us. We're a great organization." Well, that's what we say is the culture. We want you to come work with us because of X. But then what happens? You join the company and all of a sudden you become aware of what's called the hidden culture. Well, let me tell you how things really work around here. And then instead of that initial credibility gives way to derived credibility. This is how things really are. And the same is true of us individually. When we have a reputation, people are excited to meet us, but then when they meet us, does that experience live up to that initial reputation? Because then that experience creates a derived experience for them, for your employees, for your team members, for your customers. And that derived credibility is happening every time you communicate with people. So that increases or decreases. And then we have what's called terminal credibility. And that's what people are saying about us after we leave. We cannot control that. The only thing that we can control is in the moment how we treat people. And so you think about what's going on in the workplace right now. So many managers are stressed, anxious. They're we're going into economic challenging times. Perhaps we're thinking we've got supply chain issues. We've had labor shortages. We've got managers doing the work of two and three people. Yet demand stays high. We have healthcare providers. My daughter works in a delivery ward at the University of Utah, and they are just inundated as a result of all the lockdowns. Lots of babies are starting to happening right now, and so they can't turn people away, and so we're overworked, we're stressed, we're anxious, we're thinking about the next virus, monkeypox, whatever it is. Under these conditions, it is hard to be worrying about a positive brand with our people. Yet it's what's going to make our life a little easier. It's taking extra time and extra energy. You're like, man, I don't have any energy. Well, if you don't do these things, the cost is worse. And so, are you willing to put in the time and the investment in just developing your skills and abilities to influence people so that you can get the best of them? But that only comes if they get the best of you.
I think it's a really important point, Spencer. And when it comes to being the best of you, it's being the best you. One problem that sometimes people have with leaders is that they may not think, rightly so, that the leader has the technical expertise to really understand what's going on in the team, right? Because especially if the person's come in from outside, not only are they foreign to the culture and they don't understand all the policies and procedures, but you might be managing a team of engineers, or you might be managing a team of programmers or something like this. And I deal with this on a daily basis. I have a team of software developers. I'm not a software developer. I'm not coding. And so you may feel like you lack credibility because you can't do what they do, and you may not be able to solve some of the problems that they have. Like if they're like, hey, I can't get this thing to work properly. Can you help? Well, I'm not the person to ask. Uh, Oftentimes what happens as leaders, we get in positions like this and we feel like we're inadequate because we can't help our team in certain ways. But I think it's also important to note that that may not be the that may not be what is actually needed by our team. What our team needs is what we're good at doing. And so we just need to be real with ourselves and not try to pretend that we can do something that we really can't do, because all we'll do is disappoint our team members. But if we can do things that are genuine to us, where we can really add value, then we can build credibility in team members, even if we don't have the technical skill set that they have.
Such a good point, Christian. And I see that in the U.S. military. We have a structure of our military. We have what's called commissioned versus non-commissioned officers. And so the commissioned officers, they've gone to university. They have they get the keys to the equipment, so to speak, right? But it's the non-commissioned officers. These are the ones that have worked their way up through the ranks from the frontline soldier. Men or women doesn't matter. So your master sergeants, these are the ones that do the work on the ground with the people. And a lot of times they have a greater authority because they've come from the front lines, so to speak. And so then you have these commissioned officers come in, and they're the ones that are sending all the orders. And the best ones are the ones that really work with and develop influence with their non-commissioned officers. They don't say, "Hey, I know everything. I've only been in this role for 2 years, and you've been in your role for 20 years, but you're going to take direction from me." It is instead a mutual respect that they have for each other in their differing roles. And as you said, I mean, that commissioned officer can remove roadblocks and move things around to help those teams on the ground succeed and be safe. And when they are willing to really work with each other, then magic happens with the team. And the principle is the same with what you talked about. And a leader who may not have all the working knowledge of your teams, that does not take any authority away. But when you respect them and work together in ways that are mutually respectful, it can really lead to great outcomes.
Well, I totally agree. And Spencer, this has been a fascinating conversation. We've been going on for 45 minutes. I could carry on for another hour. I think this is a fascinating topic, but we'll let people get around to the rest of their day. If people want to learn more about the influence that you can have on their teams by sharing your vast knowledge and experience, and I'm not saying that to be a brown noser, I'm saying it because I've seen you work firsthand, and I know that the difference you can make in people's lives. If they want to reach out and get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do so?
Thank you. I go to our website, Altium Leadership, Altium leadership.com. You can chat me there. You can go on LinkedIn, just Spencer Horn on LinkedIn. You'll find me and message me there at Christian. And like I say, when I see people coming up, some of the best in the business, spending time with you and loving to hear from your experience and knowledge. How can people find out about you and Raconto? That is such a great tool and sponsor of our show here. What how can they learn a little bit more about that and you?
Well, thank you very much, Spencer. People can reach out to me at Christian, Christian, at raconto.io. rakonto.io. I had to think about that for a minute. Spell it correctly. So you can reach me at my email address, Christian at raconto.io. Visit our website, raconto.io. You can look me up on LinkedIn as well. Just find Christian Napier on LinkedIn. Thank you very much, Spencer, for giving us about an hour of your time today and sharing your knowledge and experience. I really, really appreciate it. Listeners, please like and subscribe to our podcast, and we'll catch you again soon.